I appreciate you all showing up today. Thank you very much. Today we're going to look into the issues of celebrity and the industry, music industry, arts industry itself. I don't think that this kind of critique has necessarily been had, and I think we're coming into a day or an age or whatever you want to call it that I feel it is absolutely necessary that we examine what is going on in our world of art and commerce and how that meets itself out for the greatest good, for the greatest amount of people. So I'm going to go into a little bit of history, but I'm going to basically just break all this down to hopefully make sense to you, the people watching. So again, I thank you for showing up, and we'll get right into this. In the latter part of the 19th century, the chronograph spawned a peculiar, novel, and contaminated offspring. This is what we have come to know today as the music industry. Now, this parasitic progeny took decades developing exploitative practices, cultural manipulation, the psychological impact of spectacle, and the capital benefits of visceral experience. By the end of World War II, this disfigured specter was masked in counterfeit splendor and false hope, and it began the process of fleecing artists and fattening its industry's progenitors. From Ike Turner's Rocket 88 in 51 and Little Richard's Tutti Frutti in 55, it didn't take long for the ideology of fame, fortune, and everything that goes with it to spread throughout its creative hosts. Now, the roots of an artistic livelihood go back 6000 BC. Mesopotamia levied its artists with a remuneration that was in accordance with a proper living standard. However, the plight of artists has always been precarious. And there are two reasons for this in which I will explain. The marketplace is as established a concept as religion and politics. One of the driving factors in artistic life is that it does not easily fit into the mold of a physical commodity. Now, in my interview with Greg Smith, the owner of the Blues Can, that you can check out on YouTube at Night Castle Productions, it was really he that brought this to my attention. And so I just want to expand a lot on what he had to say, because I found it not only fascinating and enlightening, but quite true to our experience, especially today in the field of civic music, if not on a global scale. So with that in mind, the world in which market-based invisible hand economics operates, the artist stands alone. From the plumber to the mechanic to the airline pilot, they all provide a service that produces a tangible and measured benefit. On the other hand, the performance artist or the poet or what you may have is not measured by the same metric. The intangible offerings that we represent come in the forms of reflection, melancholy, joy, sadness, etc. These emotional elements don't make a toilet flush better, they don't make a car run smoother, nor will they get you to an exotic locale. What we offer is the priceless intrinsic value of the human experience and connectedness. For these, there is no substitute. Now, in our current epoch of mass formation psychosis and existential insecurity, we are, to our wholesale detriment, lacking these fundamental attributes. And without a serious reckoning of these necessary spiritual values, there is no metaphorical possession of an Aquarian age. So, if the value of art relies solely on the eye and the ear of the beholder, judging its positive effect and personal significance, how then can one affix a price? And simply, one cannot. Admittedly, there was an opportunity with the advent of music production and disparate corporate interest to raise a musician's fiscal precarity to a realm approximating the middle class. Now, this did not necessarily take a hold across the board, but in the 60s and 70s, it did allow for the opportunity for artists to create, perform, and share their music on quite a broad spectrum. I think of both Jim Llewellyn and Brent Sokolowski, who mentioned month-long gig engagements, 6 to 12-month full gig calendars, fair pay matching inflation, ample time for the creation of new music, time to rehearse, and God forbid, time to relax, for leisure, to maybe pick up a hobby. If ever there was a golden age in music, you can make an argument that this was it. But this is not the overall function of capitalism. Zappa talked about cigar-smoking executives taking chances on new artists and progressive music to a younger, more neophobic managerial class. And that class has not in any way dissolved. We can see it replete, still in the music industry, almost in a totality, but it is also represented civically in things like the Musicians Union, CADA, Calgary Arts Development Association, NMC. These are all progressive managerial class formations. Now you may say, what does that matter? I mean, when is the last time the union did anything good for me? Maybe decades ago. But it actually does matter, and I'm going to tell you why. And that is because these agencies get the lion's share of government money that goes to things like DEI and other repulsive initiatives that hinder you from making the money you could otherwise live and create with. The way we have monetarily structured art has seized the arteries of artistic creation, proliferation, and almost entirely asphyxiated culture itself. Now, the fabulous and nouveau spectacle of the Beatles at Shea Stadium set in motion a hypothesis for an ideal economic and proliferation standard. Much like the heroin addict chasing the dragon, however, other further attempts would pale in comparison to that initial experience. However, the high remained socially significant and sufficient with every other event of its kind. So for a time, it works. Now, at this point in the merger and maturation of art and commerce, culture did flourish. These were exciting and promising times. I think of folk music waging war against nefarious governmental systems. R&B challenged the issues of justice and prejudice. Rock spoke of whimsical fantasy. Jazz stretched the boundaries of musical language and expression. Reggae promoted the human foundations of peace, love, and understanding, and country still knew how to tell a good story. The general consensus at that time was hope, creativity, experimentation, some financial well-being, and growth. Abiding was a sense that by sheer belief, hard work, and a little luck, you could still grab the brass ring. What the artist didn't apprehend, because it had neither interest nor a compulsion to care, was an understanding of things like government and finance and technocratic ideologies, evolutionary biology, even social anthropology. Some of these concepts weren't even known by those that would render this epoch impotent. With what they could conceive, however, the natural fear of stake and shareholder dissatisfaction, coupled with a natural merger of government and corporate interests, CEOs, and a pathetic managerial class, they would adapt strategies that long ago set the substandard mortar of ill-conceived foundations. Now, the facets of human proclivity that went into these decisions were things like self-interest, avarice, greed, power, and ambition. And these strategies that I mentioned were implemented without a consideration of its effect on an artistic class or how it would bastardize culture itself. From punk to grunge, attempts were made to awaken understandings of government, commerce, monarchy, military. These systems were railed against by the likes of Kurt Cobain, the Sex Pistols, and many more. Unfortunately, both would fall to the adage, man cannot serve two masters, and one would unceremoniously be added to the list of 27s that were devoured by the system they loathed. But industry cared nothing for their physical demise or their legacy. I think of Miles Goodwin and the Wrecking Crew, to name just a few examples, because the survival of any system that solely sustains itself from the consumption of capital makes sycophants of most and miscreants of the rest. Now, for those that lie outside the ring circus, the parched desert of toil, need, discontent, destitution, and defeat, the desert just continues to expand to no good end. None other than Gene Simmons himself remarked lately of the complete disintegration of industry that will no longer produce what his band became. Furthermore, Kiss just sold all the rights and merchandising for in excess of $300 million. Now, whatever you think of Gene's bass playing, he is known as a decent financier, and therefore he knows the market will bear no greater return. He knows it's done. He knows 10,000 Spotify hits is pathetic. It don't mean shit, and it will never save what cannot nor should be redeemed. Okay, Soroshin, great. So are we just fucked then? No, not in the least. But let me continue. Although we have fallen credulously to this untruth, we are not complicit in industry's initiation, operation, or exploitation. What we do possess with all natural right, agency, and duty is in the form of its amelioration. We have now arrived at the point where celebrity and the simple fabulousness of entertainment have consumed the creation of pure, unadulterated culture. We have no fixed point, we have no compass, and no resources to sustain the pursuit of excellence and mastery. Look, culture is created by the masses, its value lying in the simple fact of its own creation. It is never censored, and it lasts into antiquity. Entertainment, however, is created by the few. It is consumed quickly, thrown away even quicker. It affixes creative boundaries that are commensurate with a free market, and it leaves its patrons unsatiated and lamenting more. Although this is somewhat anecdotal, I have witnessed society repudiating undue, unnatural praise. Celebrity is the ugly offspring of a distorted and malformed industry. Whether it's Oprah and the Rock's deficient and privileged Lahaina response, Bill Clinton's alleged 27 flights on Jeffrey Epstein's plane, Sean Combs' newest allegations, the curtain is being raised, and we are apprehending the delusion of dubious wizards as completely common, if not ethically and morally corruptible. Now, I do want to say that this ethic and moral corruption is a human thing. What we are dealing with, I believe, more than anything else, although perhaps one could say a spiritual deficiency, is a psychological one. The epoch that we're in right now, and with all the information that we're getting, good, bad, and indifferent, is a division not only of people, but the psyche itself. And it is, I think, time that we all got together and started having great, grand conversations and started to leave some of our own hubris and things like that behind. And when I mention psychology in terms of what I'm discussing here, what I'm talking about is that if it was left to any one of us necessarily to be put in a situation where we have no accountability, where we can do whatever the hell we want at any time, where we have all the money in the world and access to everything we need, we may fall to the most dark, nefarious parts of ourselves. And that is true. That is not, there is no consideration there. Every psychiatrist that I've ever read or know of has intimated that very thing. A Nazi guard in '66 would not have burned people alive, but in 1939 he was. And there is an entire psychology behind that. And unfortunately, it is one that we all possess, and it is one that we all need to mitigate. So I want to put that together with what I'm describing here. I am not necessarily judging people. I am showing what celebrity ultimately does. So now, the same applies on a civic level to both individuals and institutions. And I'm talking about those that are neither curated nor masterful, that parade themselves with ego and contempt. They have privileged but unwarranted access to the most lucrative and visible work, and in my estimation, are adored well beyond what is their natural right to possess or should be our desire to give. These are things that we have to get back to. Because as far as I'm concerned, although there's a paradox here, no one is special and everyone is. But this is the reality under a free market, unregulated system. It raises some far above what is naturally granted to all, and it diminishes and shows repugnance to all lesser, yet I would argue, more valuable and more holistic contributions. And this is an allusion to centralization, where few are chosen and the rest anxiously wait, scraps that fall from industry's banquet table. It is a pathetic contemplation, I will agree with you, but you only need to look up to observe its reality. So I ask you, is this satisfactory? Is this all we can aspire to? Is it sufficient? Is it honorable to art, artist, and culture? Do our civic artists, you and me, need petition monolithic entities and be ignored by a professional managerial class parasite? These institutions and NGOs, non-governmental organizations, are at the behest of it. Now let's look deep into reality. Not you, the artistic public, but to stakeholders, to shareholders, and to ridiculous DEI programs. Programs that statistically have nothing to do with the propagation of culture, but aim instead to fetishize and exploit minorities, that give the inhumane instruction of equality of outcome rather than that of opportunity, and frustrate and marginalize an entire artistic public. And this they do all under the guise of the mentally deficient idea of compassion and politeness. If you forget every prior statement I've made, remember this: a polite society is not a moral society. It is the warping and reduction of actual virtue to that of a signal. The managerial class does not love the proletariat. They just hate the rich. They do their bidding out of spite and the corrupted desire to attain what the other possesses. What I am stating here are all constituent parts that lead to destruction, not safeguarding, not continuity, not health, not growth, or perpetuation. I'm going to leave this episode here on this somewhat somber note. I think it does the mind and soul well to contemplate uncomfortable truths. Now, this is not the final word in an otherwise sad tale. If I were only to bitch and bemoan a perpetually bad situation, you should never entertain a word I have to say. Rather, this is the analytical phase of what leads to optimism and intensifying change, because the skeptic is the greatest optimist. I have thought long on this subject, long enough to formulate ideas regarding the changes I speak of. Part 2 of Late Stage Celebrity will provide those concepts and visualization. So please, like, subscribe, comment, and I mean that, comment, share, and most of all, take a moment to reflect. Be well, and thank you.